Let's start discussion on very important topic, that is the threshold calibration and optimizing the transaction monitoring system. So the transaction monitoring system will do the the alert or the threshold rate alerts on the the transaction on the rule base. So to calibrate that system by the balancing the fails positive and fails positive for the effective compliance and to effective optimization the rules that defined by the compliance or the internal rules or the business logic that apply in the transaction monitoring system to generate the alerts or to generate the red flags. So let's start discussion on that in the technical side and the functional side, and you will able to understand how to do the threshold calibration and the optimize the transaction monitoring system and what are the tools and techniques we use for that. So let's start discussion on that. So I'll give you the introduction about the transaction monitoring system, what is it and why it is used in the banking. So in bank there is the n number of transaction we do daily basis, and from that transaction there is some criminals, they also do their transaction for the illicit purpose or to do the transaction for the terrorist financing, or they transfer their money for the sanctions country or the sanctions person or the person who are the terrorists, and he has the list, internal fraudulent list or the blacklist or the external fraudulent list, or that the central bank or the financial institutions unit of that country will allow do not do the banking involvement for the certain customer or the political exposed person. So these are the transaction we are the monitoring. So the purpose of the transaction monitoring system is to automate the system used by the financial institution to detect to the unusual and potentially suspicious transactions, to identify such transactions and put the alert on these transactions. So we need to do the calibration of these model and to do is that performing good, because it has the benefits. So I'll discuss or what are the benefits of that calibration. So let's understand these way, and then the goal of the transaction monitoring system, so to identify the activity that may be linked the financial crime or the criminal activity, or where the customer or the criminal want to clean their money, their dirty money, to anti-money laundering and counter terrorist financing, such as money laundering and the terrorist financing. So avoiding these things and how it works. So the system use a predefined rule and threshold to analyze the transaction data and generate the alerts or red alert or a flag on the search transaction that look like the on the basis of the rules we are logic we are feed into the system. So they are generated the alerts. So rule based alert or the risk based approach we follow. So that way this work, and EOD process or the T+1 day that happens in the bank. So the challenges, the setting the right threshold is a crucial and the important for the banks to reduce the fails positive and the fails negative rate and too low, and how you may get too many alerts and too high and you miss the critical red flag from the system. So we need to calibrate, we need to do the threshold tuning continuously, and we identify what are the threshold amount we should in the next in the system. So let's move on the next slide. That is the calibration dilemma. What are the challenges when we are to calibrate these models? Let's discuss on that. So inevitable trade-off. So there is a let's discuss on that. So constant balancing act. The central problem and the goals in the constant balancing act, the financial institution must a fine line between the two types of error. There is a type 1 error and type 2 error. So we consider that while we are doing the threshold tuning, and the central problem, like there is a direct inverse relationship between the fails positive and the fails negative thing. So we are not able to predict that thing, and when you are the threshold to catch more suspicious activity, like reducing the fails negative, and you will inevitable increase the number of legitimate transaction flags, and that will conversely, if you raise the threshold to direct the numbers and unnecessary alert, your risks will get more, and your efforts or the your human interaction will increase, the manual effort will increase, and you are not able, or your system is not able to detect the proper way of the red flags or the true positive error or the error which are genuinely suspicious transactions. So the goal of the transaction monitoring system calibration is to find the optimal or the sweet spot where the both the type 1 error and type 2 error will minimize and ensuring the compliance efficiency without the compromising on the ability to detect the financial crime, or we are able to identify the more accurately financial crime and identify the financial criminal activities from that system. So that's why we do the calibration of the system. So let's deep dive into the fails positive. So the fails positive is a costly burden, and what are they? The legitimate transaction and activities that are incorrectly flagged and the has a suspicious by the system. So the system will do the incorrectly flag and red alerts for the transactions that incorrectly but that genuine transactions. So these are the transactions or the red alert, we call them as a fails positive. So we want to reduce the fails positive rate and we want to increase the true positive rates. So common causes in inflexible rules, the one rule size fits all approaches to the rules, and outdated data, customer profile are not keep up to date, we need to up to date customer profile, add their the risk based approach, add that, and the lack of context, the system fails to understand the customer behavior, normal behavior, how to customer will work. So that's why we are implementing the AIML techniques to understand the customer behavior, the normal customer behavior. Okay, and the impact, the waste the resources. Yes, we need, if there is a all the alert generated by the system, so that we need to allocate the resource and to to work on that and to identify it is a true positive or the fails positive. So we need to allocate the resource, and on that the fails positive or the alerts, the compliance team or the operation team or the business team or the IT team need to spend their valuable time and the money investing being the alert is genuine or not genuine. So we want to reduce the fails positive and to increase the true positive rates, and from that the operational inefficiency, manual review lead to delay and the backlogs of the fails positive or the true positive, and we are not able to identify the genuine fraudulent transaction, and the customer dissatisfaction. Obviously the legitimate transaction are blocked and delay or leading to poor customer experience. So whenever we find the red flag, and then we will to debit freeze that account, and the customer are not able, the genuine customer, the customer who are not the fine criminal, or the customer who are doing this transaction for their some business purpose or some their the regular activities, and we if the bank will block their account, so he might be face the the bad experience with bank, and that's the customer dissatisfaction will happen in the fails positive. So let's discuss on the fails negative. It is an also the very crucial and very critical aspects for the bank, financial institution, insurance firm. So where the hidden the risks, what are they? Truly suspicious or illicit transaction that goes undertaken by the system. The genuine transaction, that is a suspicious transaction where the terrorists or the the criminal want to fund their money for the terrorism, or he or she might doing the illicit transaction or to clean their dirty money. But by the the improper calibration, we are not able to identify such criminal activities, and that goes under the system, and the criminal will enjoy their the criminal activities. So the common causes of this is the high thresholds, we put the high threshold, and they and the criminal we perform below the threshold amount transaction and clean their money. The system is not sensitive enough to capture the suspicious activity of such criminal or of such terrorism, and they are easily move their the funds from here to there and do the criminal activities. And the sophisticated criminals, the financial criminal intentionally structure and the transactions to evade the detection and the system gaps. The system is not designed to detect the new and emerging typologies in the system, and that's why the fails positive, fails negative will the alert will there is no alert will generated by the system, and truly the criminals or the will transact their money. And the impact, the regulatory fines, obviously the sir the penalties from regulatory bodies for failing to prevent the financial crime, and use are the penalties are, the financial institution or bank need to pay for the regulator on the fails of the improper identify the financial crime, and to allow the financial criminals to use their the banking system. And the reputation damage is loss of public trust and credibility. So the reputation of that bank or that financial institution will damage in the society. And the social criminal activities, the primary purpose of the system is defended and allowing the illicit fund to follow the undertaken. So the misuse the criminal, and they will easily clean their money and send their money to the terrorist financing. So that's why we need to decrease the false negative also things. Let's discuss on the what is a threshold calibration. So how, what is the exact we called as a threshold calibration, the solution of that, the definition. The system is a continuous process of fine tuning the parameters and threshold of transaction monitoring system. The system will continuously interact with the threshold and identify the red flags, and on the basis of rule we are providing the systems. The goal of that to minimize the false positive and reduce the false negative and improve the alert quality or the quantity, the alert quality. So minimize the false positive, reduce the number of unpredictable alerts or reduce these alert, and the reduce the false negative. So increase the system ability to detect the even suspicious activity in the system. So what are the transaction done by the criminal or illicit purpose or the terrorist financing. So we need to increase the true negative or the true positive alerts and reduce or minimize the false positive and the false negative alerts in the system. That's why we are doing the threshold calibration of the system or transaction monitoring system. And the ongoing process, the calibration, it's not just a one time event. It if we done one time, so that is not that way. We should do the calibration of year one time in the year, or every 1.5 year, 18 months we need to do the calibration process, and it must be performed regularly to adopt the changing criminal PMS at the business operation or the new techniques. We need to involve and do the calibration with new way. So let's move on the next slide. That is the calibration process. How the process of calibration will happen in the banks, and what are the systematic steps that follow by the bank to the calibration, or the big four organization to follow this. So bank will hire the big four organization to do their the calibration process. So step by step approach. So first one is risk assessment and a client segment, and the establish a baseline. Then the perform A/B testing, which we call the above and below line testing. Okay, below, above and below line, and the analyze the adjust and the iterate the documentation. So create the documentation. So let's discuss the first one is a risk assessment and the client segmentation. So define the group based on the risk level and the product uses and the geography. So we filter the customer on the basis of their the geography or the data which we collected while we are onboarding the customer. So customer due diligence, enhanced due diligence, and it is and the political exposure person or the PIP person. So we define it's the normal customer, or the high risk customer, medium risk customer, or the low risk customer. So we are define the segments on the risk based approach to define that customers. So then the tolerance threshold to each specific segment, and higher the threshold for capture the client and the individual. So we define the threshold tuning for that customer. And then we will move for the next stage, that is establish a baseline. So use the current threshold or the historical data set for starting point to understand that how the past that thing will happen and how the currently that will performing. And then we start to the calibration process, and we define the calibration process. So then we perform the A/B testing, which we call above and below line testing. So before we which we call the ATL and the BTL. So above the line testing will increase the threshold to see which fails positive are eliminated and to reduce from the system. At the and then the below line testing, the lower the threshold to see if new relevant alert or the potential true positive are captured or not captured by the system. So that analysis we will do in the ATL and the BTL testing, and then we move to analyze and adjust. So examine the result of the testing. So we will do the n number of customer with the banks and the n number of transaction that done by the customer. So these are the population data, and it is and the use data of the population. So we will do the sampling of that population. So we will do the snowball sampling, random sampling. We will pick up the random data and with the databases to run the SQL queries and to filter and to take the appropriate customer and their transaction, and then we do the threshold tuning, and then we analyze and determine the adjustment to the threshold will be provide for the best balance alone, and to analyze these things and then iterate and the document. So we once we do all these things, then we will prepare the threshold tuning document that will send to the bank or the financial institution or the insurance, and then they will send that to the regulation how their the transaction monitoring system will work, and then they will customize their rule if required or if necessary, and on the basis of true positive, fails positive, true negative, or the fails negative threshold tuning and iterative document that implement the new threshold and monitor their the performance of the new threshold in the next cycle, and document the entire process of audit and regulatory purpose and to send them to the regulator. So let's move on the next slide. It is a key matrix for the success of the project. So how to measure your calibration effort are success or not? So what are the techniques we should use to that? So alert the volume, the number, the total number of alert are generated by the system, that is also and on that alert how much the genuine suspicious or illicit activity done by the customer, so that will help us. So the ratio between that and the fails negative fails positive rates, how much the fails positive rate are generated by the system, and the percentage of that, the percentage of alert that are close and non-suspicious and key target for the reductions, and how are the ratio of the true positive rates. So that will help us to the calibration and the matrix for the calibration levels, and the alert to the SAR ratio, the suspicious activity report that generated by the system or that manually created by the compliance to send to the financial intelligence units of that country. In India, the central bank under the body, the financial intelligence unit in India. So the number of alert that result in a suspicious activity report filing and higher the ratio indicate the better alert quality and increase the system performance. Okay, and the closure ratio. So how to close that case and what are the process or the technique to case closure ratios. So percentage of alert that are successfully investigated and closed within the specific time frame. So that will also help us to the calibration process and the detection rate. So true positive, the system ability to correctly identify the actual illicit activity, how much the system will detect the actual illicit activity or the genuine financial crime transaction and do the debit freeze on such transaction. So let's move on. The next slide is a best practices. So what are the best practices should we follow by the financial institution, bank, or the regulator, or the, the insurance companies to calibration and to increase the calibration of the transaction monitoring system models or the softwares. So start with the risk-based approach, and it is and the most important, and most of the banks follow the risk-based approach. So we can calibrate the base your calibration for the specific risk customer on by your institution. So in risk-based calibrate approach, we will define the three stages of the customer. So high risk customer, low risk customer, or the medium risk customer, and accordingly for each type of customer we define the threshold and apply the business logic, and then the system will generate the alerts. So then the leverage and data analytics. So use the data to understand the typical customer behavior and identify the hidden patterns or identify the patterns of the customer behavior, on that basis to generate the system alerts, and that will increase the true positive efficiency and reduce the false positive or the false negative, and ensure the data quality. So garbage in and the garbage out. So that is one of the concept that use in the model calibration, and high quality data in the foundational things we use to ensure the data quality, and documenting the everything. So functional way, technical way, non-technical way, or the business analyst document, or the technical document, or the fine tuning document, or the process document. All these things we should the document and maintain the clear audit trail for all the calibration efforts and decision we take. So what are the calibration we do, what are the rules we are doing the calibration and how their performance tuning we done. So we do the everything, the document for the everything, and then the calibration across the teams. So involve the compliance, data science, business operation to get the holistic view of the calibration and help them to work on the same. So let's the conclusion on that slide or on that video. So key takeaway from that video is that the threshold calibration is a crucial and ongoing process for any effective transaction monitoring system, and it is and not an one time process. It is at the continuous process we do annually or half yearly, this process to calibrate our models or to analyze the performance of that model with applying the quantitative analysis technique, or hire the some big four organization to do the calibration on the basis of the bank or the financial institution on the insurance company. And by systematically balancing the false positive and the false negative, the financial institution can reduce the operational cost and enhance the compliance efficiency, and most importantly strengthen the defense and against the financial crime. They will identify the financial criminals with accurately and more effectively, and analyze their transaction patterns, and to avoid or to reduce the to do not allow the financial criminals to allow their the banking or financial system, and they make themselves away from the to pay the penalties on the allow the criminals to use their the financial system. So that's all about these videos. If you like my efforts and my video, please like and subscribe my channel, so that will motivate me to create more such videos for you, and update you on the industry knowledge. So thank you so much guys for attending these videos. Thanks.